This is Power 102 Digital Wednesday. On Wednesday, Farid Ali is the host for Hard Talk, and today's topic, the education system in Trinidad and Tobago. Good afternoon, Farid. You'll introduce your guest.
Good afternoon, David. It's good to hear your voice.
Thank you, my brother.
Mr. Martin Longking, thank you so much for making yourself available to us. It's not very often we have celebrities in our midst. So I have to take the time to thank you. I know that you've had a busy time at it from all that I've read in the newspaper, the editorials surrounding so many different issues touching and concerning education. Your job is a hard job, and I don't envy you at all. I see you having a late lunch, so that goes in the territory.
Yes, it does. Good afternoon, Farid, and good afternoon to the listeners of Power 102, The Drive.
My immediate question is, when I looked at the dictionary, it says that bullying, the explanation for bullying, the meaning of it is seek to harm, intimidate, or coerce. And some of the similes, or some of the similar, the words that connote its meaning. It's to bully is to persecute, to oppress, to torment, to intimidate, to strong arm, to push about, to push around. When you examine your early education, primary into secondary, were you ever the subject of bullies? Did they ever, pull their bows in your direction and aim their arrows at your person in any form?
It's quite you know that you would ask this question. It is and you can persons who know my background and will look at the ethnic background. So both my parents and grandparents are grandparents really are immigrants from China, both, and so both my parents are second generation Trinidadian Chinese, and so I am an offspring of two Chinese descendants.
Yeah.
So by and large in Trinidad and Tobago, they address me as Chinese. Yeah, and the community in which I grew up, thankfully, were not along that line of looking at my ethnic and my siblings as well too. We grew up with persons of East Indian, African, Douglas, so we grew up together as one. We played football together, etc., etc. But quite interestingly, as you asked me, I was a victim of bullying in the primary school, not so much secondary, but in the primary school. So much so I was telling my colleagues who went to school with me that at one instance, I went to an all boys school. One of the boys spat upon me, and I can always remember that. I went and I made a report to one of the teachers, and the teacher would have addressed it. However, all until now, we of the Chinese descent, because persons do not understand the culture from which our ancestors came from, we are subject to many retorts and many, to a point, harsh words, and persons would say things that are degrading to us, and that is also a form of bullying. It is almost so like it is a joke. It becomes a joke now in society. So when you see a person of Chinese descent, that you say all kind of things that I don't want to repeat here, doesn't sound like English language, and it's a joke, and not realizing that you are dealing with human beings. You are dealing with persons who are just like yourself. So apart from racial tension, that form of interaction with persons. So I even get it when I go to schools as well too. The children will follow what their parents would have done. and you hear them, giggling and so on in the background and saying certain things and not realizing that I am a second generation Trinidadian, but I am also an educator, a teacher. And until you started to, talk to them and point out these things, they are shocked to hear that. Even persons, adults now, who interact with me, they sometimes think that I did not grow up in Trinidad and Tobago. So as I said, it's quite interesting that you would have asked that question, because yes, I have been a victim of it. But I mean, with the support of my parents, family, friends, and so I was able to brush those things aside, take it as a joke sometimes, and go forward.
The interesting thing is, and I'm saying this for the listening public, um, the things that we as parents repeat in our households, and the conversations we condone with our peers, and the children are listening. Um, the children form the opinion that if it is my father is saying it, or my elder sibling or my elder aunt is partaking in a discussion, and it seems to be a discussion she's enjoying, speaking about somebody in an ill way or in a nasty way, that well, we could repeat that too. We could behave the same way. Children practice and they emulate and mirror what they see. And it's not just, I'm saying, parents and aunts and cousins and siblings. What is happening in the public space in terms of our politicians, the way they mock and jeer each other in the parliament. Somehow you believe, well, if the PM could do so, and if the leader of the opposition could do that, and my representative can do that, then we can all do it. And it's high time. And the thing is, this dialogue we have in here is evergreen. The president of TUTTA in 2050 will be having the same dialogue with another presenter. This is not going to go away. Bullying is a crime. It is crime. And crime comes from a sinful beginning. It goes against the tenets of, if you're Christian, you say the Ten Commandments or biblical teaching. And I guess in every religious order, there will be similar teachings. It's an innate nature. Was it Hobbes who said that man by nature is nasty, dirty, brutish, without the existence of the state? In other words, the state is law and order. So without there being law and order, and without there being a guiding force, because that is what law and order is, a guiding force, man tends to exist outside of law and order. I'll tolerate me with this with this example, right? I guess it shouldn't come from your mouth; it will come from mine. When I was in school, there are stereotypes that children repeat, and they repeat it through their mouths, and it's something that they obviously heard somewhere. So they would say about the East Indian, they have flat bottom and no bottom. They would say about the Chinese that they see dog. And they will say all sorts of things about everybody who is somebody out there. And these things they laugh at it. In the reverse, they might say the Afro children, they poor people, depending on where you are geographically and in terms of your station. And then they may say stereotypes of the reverse, big bottom. So that sort of language, that language belongs to a society, and it's developed and encouraged in the community. The children mirror it when they observe what's happening in and around them. And then the school is a microcosm of what's happening outside there. You're bringing all the personalities into one space, 35 children in a classroom. What are they going to talk about? They could only talk about what they sense with what they experience with their senses, what they see, they hear, they smell, they taste. So, and the thing about bullies is that they find something. There is no perfect individual. They make a joke about the space between your two front teeth. And if there's no space, they make a joke about the color of your tooth. They talk about you're chubby, you're skinny. You can never please them. the problem I'm having is whether these issues are being addressed and these stereotypes that are being cultivated, if it's being demonized at home in terms of whether parents hear it and correct their children. So when the teacher reinforces that comment in the classroom, they know, all right, so I'm being reminded of what I've been taught at home. And when they see the consistency in terms of the lesson being taught at home and being reinforced in school, they recognize that there is truth and a basis and a foundation for not carrying themselves like that. Tell me something. Um, the issue of bullying did not manifest itself with uh, Jaden Lalchan. Um, this would have been a phenomenon that has been within the fabric of the society for generations in terms of school children. It happens every day. Unfortunately, Jaden Lalchan, um, you know, took extreme action, and one could only believe because of the extreme pain he was in, and that has brought this whole issue of bullying to the front table now, to the front burner. Uh, what have what has TUTTA been doing in terms of reaching out to the Lalchan family? I don't mean uh, actually placing a call, but in terms of addressing that situation, have you all liaised with the TUTTA representative and the PTA and so on at that school to find out what is being done to avoid another situation similar to this on that compound? Because remember, the bully there, for now, he remains in the system. Is that something being looked into? And have your institution, TUTTA, reached out to the principal, to the PTA, to ensure that they address correcting that wrong or the alleged wrong?
Okay, so in the first instance, let me express TUTTA's condolences to the family, relatives, and friends, as well as the staff and students of his fellow students at St. Stephen's College. To answer your question directly, yes, we did visit the school yesterday. When we arrived, the staff was having a staff meeting, and the principal allowed us to address very briefly the staff at the staff meeting just before they ended the staff meeting. And I want to say that you could have seen the emotions. Emotions were right in the staff room, and you could have seen how it affected the teachers there, the educators. We did speak with the principal and the staff representatives to get first-hand information as to the events which led to that unfortunate incident. And I want to say that a loss of any life, especially one of a student, is unfortunate, and whatever were the incidents that led to the student having to lose any sense of hope in life and having to exit this world, we condemn in the strongest manner. But what we want to also condemn is what is taking place in the public domain, most most times in the social media aspect. I was privy to just a few comments that took place, but I can tell you that it does not warrant persons to go to the extreme. And so in some comments, you're hearing, well, them teachers, they should feel what the parents going through right now. Um, Persons would have posted the picture of the dean who was dealing with the incident, posted the picture of the dean. And what we understand is that the daughter of that dean, she has been herself a victim of bullying in itself. And what persons are doing in the public domain as well is can be construed as bullying as well too. All the threats, all the the what they're saying on social media, especially to the principal as well too. I saw one where he would have indicated that his account was hacked. There was a comment that was placed on that account. I think it's X, is the social media account, and persons afterwards saying he lying, he do that for spite, all that is excuse and so, and persons are making comments without actually knowing the facts that surround the issue, and the parents are grieving, and I know that they will have an outpouring of grief and will make certain comments, but I caution persons in the public domain that they should find out exactly what took place. Don't just, as you know, Fareed, in any issue or any topic, there are usually three sides of the story, and I won't go through the three sides. Get to know all sides before you make those public pronouncements. We condemn bullying in, with the strongest possible terms. That and it's in the school code of conduct. We have it on a part of the code of ethics for our members as well, and it has no place in society, especially in schools. It is a way of terrorizing persons who cannot sometimes defend themselves, and we condemn it in the strongest possible term. But we also condemn persons who are vilifying the teachers there, because it it is an incident that took place, yes. But if we look at the history of St. Stephen's College, their reputation has always been one of nurturing the students there. We were there and we saw the level of discipline that these students had while their teachers were having the staff meetings. There were no incidents or no form of children running around the place and harassing each other. They were studying sometimes outside the classroom, inside the classroom. So St. Stephen's has always had a reputation of nurturing the children apart from the academics, all the other areas. And so in this instance, because of the incident, we believe that they should not be getting the type of attack that they are. It is the teachers have to mourn as well too. Let the teachers mourn, in a manner that is fitting, but don't be harassing and saying things that are sometimes downright nasty to our teachers at St. Stephen's College.
I think we also need to bear in mind that there are people hurting out there. So I take the plug that you've made in terms of we shouldn't telescope an entire school with one incident. St. Stephen's would have had a track record in Princestown. I read in the newspaper it's the pride of Princestown. The very fact that prior to this incident, if there was any, there was no story associated with violence or anything of the sort, any similar issue before this. But all the same, I would imagine that the public is giving vent, and like everything else, in 9 days, this is going to be over. People wouldn't even remember. They'll ask themselves, but who's that? We saw it through the years. Sean Luke got the biggest plug because he was a young guy and because of the nature of the crime and so on, and that it was murder. We have having said that, we have a issue with mental health in this country.
Yes,
and suicide. I remember reading the Minister of Education said that there are 400 children on suicide alerts throughout the nation's schools, that they are being monitored and they're being, so in other words, the Ministry of Education is mindful that mental health among young people is an issue, and they've so much so that there are programs and there are students who are being monitored and I would imagine cared for by extension in some way. If we were to apply some statistics to that, the national statistics on suicide speaks to between 2019 and 2021, we've had an average of 93 suicides in this country per year. If we were to put that in context, just imagine the month of September that just passed. We would have had, if that statistic carries true, 90 plus persons taking their life in between the 1st of September to the 30th of September. And that statistic speaks true in terms of between 2019 and 2021. Between 2021 and 2024, the statistics reflected an amplified figure of 106 suicides per year. So between 2019 and 2024, a period of, well, that's about 5 years, we've had about 790 suicides in this country. It means to say that for various reasons, young persons have seen it fit to end their lives because of pressure. I was looking at an article, browsing and trying to find something that speaks to that. On the 4th of October 2024, Dr. Varma Diyal made a plug. He said that to combat rising stigma in TNT, start mental health education in schools. And he basically was speaking to the fact that, there are persons out there in a lot of pain. He goes, I'm reading a small extract from it, right? It says here, in response to whether or not more psychiatric centers are needed to combat mental illness in Trinidad and Tobago, he replied, we need ways to capture people to come into the clinics, and the stigma is always there. He said combating this stigma must start from the classroom. So it has to be a liaison between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health. For instance, a child comes in and that poor child has an alcoholic father or something going on in the home, and the home is dysfunctional. We want to say that if teachers can look at a child and recognize that child has some sort of problem, and now get that child into counseling. So that's just a small clip, right, in terms of what is there. I took that from an article written by Shirlan Ramsubag, Friday, October 4th, 2024, the Daily Express. So, I mean, the listening public can read more of it from that. That's a small plug from it. My concern is that issue concerning Jaden Lalchan invites the question, if the teachers were aware that this was happening over a sustained and protracted period of time, and it was an issue that was somewhat beyond them, or an issue that could have been dealt with from many angles, meaning that they do what they can within the school in order to control his environment. And then at the same time, the parents would have to account for what sort of complaints he made at home. They were saying that he was the subject of bullying. They made complaints to the school. It's easy to blame the school in entirety, but I would imagine that the school's principal or the powers that be within the school could have referenced him in terms of for counseling. If it is this young man, and I'm talking in oughts and maybes, if it is we have another person being bullied out there and they want a transfer, let us say the principal looked in it, because Jaden Lalchan was subject to this situation for what it is said in the editorial for about a 4-year period. One would wonder, if it is the situation is improving, how easy would it be for TUTTA to get involved, or for the school to trigger a process to have him transferred to a different environment, a different school, if that was one of the options?
If it is one of the options, the administrators of the school, so not only the principal, we have the vice principal, dean, middle management, would recognize that they need to remove him from the present environment. And I'm speaking generally, I'm not speaking specifically to St. Stephen's College. And so would make representation to the parents, because the parents or guardians, that's the body that will trigger the transfer. The school can recommend if it's necessary or if it's an option, but it is up to the parent to want to have the child transferred. And once that is done and the school makes a good case, then the Ministry of Education, through the school supervisors, and once the receiving school, we identify a school that is a best place for the child. Once the receiving school has the place for the child, then the transfer could take place. If the chosen school doesn't have the space, then another school can be looked at. and you usually try to get the child as close to the residence as possible. But the option of transferring is one that is available to the parent and to the schools that are involved. So it is not one that the door is closed or shut completely.
Do you know of any instances in your life experience as a teacher where that sort of measure was engaged? I'm not talking about this particular situation. I'm
Sure.
referring to in the past.
I'm trying to recall specifically any, none comes to mind, but I am certain that there would have been instances where the parents would have indicated, look, whatever interventions were attempted were not successful, and so we believe that our child would be in a safer environment in another school, and transfers would have taken place.
Did St. Stephen's College, and you could refuse to answer, did St. Stephen's College reach out to TUTTA or bring to the attention of TUTTA that they have had issues like this to deal with or to treat with within their school in the past before this incident?
Not to my knowledge, and from what I understand, St. Stephen's College would have had their procedures and policies put in place to deal with whatever within the discipline part of the school. Now, I have to also point out that St. Stephen's College does not have their full complement of deans appointed, and so they would have had persons acting. And one can appreciate that when you don't have your full complement to assist in issues of pastoral care, discipline, and so on, then it poses a challenge. However, I know that the school would have been able to cope with whatever issues. All schools are not insulated from issues of these nature, and some schools, because of the support that they get from the Ministry of Education through the Student Support Services Division, sometimes they get from stakeholders as well too. Some parents are able to access medical personnel who can assist the school in psychology, sociology, etc., and so would be able to cope. And then the systems within the school themselves would lend to additional support as well.
Is it outside of your power as TUTTA president to indicate to secondary and primary schools, or let us say, if we have to lower the threshold to schools where there are children at risk, to have the principal at least log with you all some of the issues that they are coping with, that they are wrestling with, and therefore at least if it is that all right, so we have on record by way of policy schools that were dealing with some problems contacted us. So the principal of, let us say, St. Stephen's, let you know here what's happening. These are some of the pressing issues that we are dealing with in this school. It's been happening for a sustained and protracted period of time. We are logging that with you that this is one of the concerns, because we may need you as president of TUTTA to intervene on our behalf with the ministry. And therefore, when you become aware, then you can have some sort of machinery in place in terms of institutional machinery where you would monitor by way of phone call to find out how things are progressing there. In other words, what I'm saying, to use raw language, let us say we have a bullying problem around globally, within or regionally, within the country, nationally. And what happens is TUTTA, given this particular incident involving Jaden Lalchan, indicates to his principal, listen, we don't want to hear another incident like this where we have to be put in a position of accountability. Let us know what you're dealing with, and we can see if it is we can approach the ministry to get involved in this particular school to ensure that if you're lacking personnel in this particular area, that it's done. Because I would imagine TUTTA's job is to also look after the interests of the teachers, its representatives, its education from a stakeholder point of view. Are you of the view that given what has happened, that some sort of involvement, future involvement, where you can actually give directives to principals to converse with you all. It doesn't have to be Mr. Martin Lumpkin personally directly, but at least persons assigned within your institution to so there can be reciprocity, there can be exchange of ideas from a supply side, from this end as one of the key stakeholders. Is it something that you're open-minded to? Do you see any value in something like that? Because what we have to think about what's going to happen in the next year, the next 2 years to avoid these things.
So TUTTA is always open to our membership and any difficulties or issues, challenges that they may have within the realm of the school and the education system. And so when it comes to these issues, they would generally reach out when they believe that all that they have tried is not succeeding, or they are not getting the type of support that they require from the Ministry of Education, because the Ministry of Education should be having that, lending that support to the school through the Student Support Services Division. And again, we are seeing in the public domain that the SSSD has a critical role in the education system. They deal with special education guidance. They have social workers, and so they go out and they deal with individual students on a well, not even on a daily basis at the same school, because they are in clusters. So they are under-resourced and understaffed. And we believe that there should be a presence of the Student Support Services Division, each one of them on a daily basis at every school to lend the support. Because by and large, teachers would have done some level of training in terms of child psychology and sociology, but we are not trained to actually carry out those functions of intervention. We can identify certain traits that may show up in terms of the students, but the school needs that sort of intervention and assistance and resources. And so whenever the administration or even teachers are challenged by the system, they will let us know. Or if there are issues relating to their jobs, they will generally let us know. And yes, we do have what we call staff representatives, tutor representatives at the schools, not at all schools. And then we have the formation of district executives and DSRAs. And then we have the national, and I also must say, besides district, we have branches as well too. And so they are always encouraged to reach out to TUTTA to let us get a sense of what is taking place and how we can assist by advocating and reaching out to the Ministry of Education and the Division of Education, Research and Technology.
What sort of relationship does TUTTA have with the PTAs throughout the country? I know that there's a national PTA, Parent Teachers Association, and I believe it's Ron Walters Stewart is the president. But in terms of your relationships with the PTAs of various schools, do you have a log, let's say, of the PTA president for any particular school or for each school, and you would reach out to them, they would reach out to you? Are the lines of communication open between your organization and the PTA presidents through and throughout, or you liaise directly with principals only?
We have a cordial relationship with the National Parent Teachers Association. We have continued to have that sort of relationship, and we have discussions on issues that affect both the parents and the teachers. And so we have started a level of collaboration and advocacy as well too. At the level of the schools, it would be with the staff and the relevant PTAs. They will have their association and meetings and those sort of interactions and such. And I must say as well too, in some school there are the local school boards which will also form a level of support as well to some of the schools, mostly the government schools. But by and large, PTAs are liaised with the schools, and in some instances, there are great relationships with the PTA and the school, and administration and staff. And in some instances, there are no PTAs, and in other instances, there are some loggerheads and back and forth in terms of. But once the policies are established properly, we see that the role and function of the PTAs will lend support to the school. Once it isn't that it is us against them, but we have the same goals and objectives and vision for the entire school, the population within the school, not only students, not only teachers, but the entire school, then that relationship can be harmonized properly and work towards the betterment of the institution.
Did you all have, or do you all have a tutor rep at St. Stephen's College?
We have 2 tutor reps.
I could ask. I would, if you can't answer, I have no issue with it. But did the tutor reps at any point in time bring to the attention of tutor that this is what we're dealing with, a toxic bullying culture as it relates to a particular individual? Nothing like that came to your table?
Nothing like that came to us, and even when we met with the staff and the tutor reps, there were no indication as such. As said previously, St. Stephen's College has a rich history of nurturing the students and dealing with whatever issues they have internally. And so I'm not saying that they were 100% successful, but they, by and large, dealt with their situation such that the reputation of St. Stephen's College is such that there has not been any real public outcry, only this one to my recollection, and I've been in tutor over 20 years now. I cannot recall any such at St. Stephen's College.
All right. Allow me to read from the newspaper here. This is Tuesday, the 8th of October, 2024. The Daily Express, an article written by one Kamari Rodriguez. It says here, and I'm quoting, days before the 15-year-old Jaden Lalchan died, teachers of St. Stephen's College had to escort him home after school, fearing that he would be attacked and harmed by bullies. This is before the incident. Teachers were escorting this young man home, and they had a fear and a concern that he would be attacked and harmed by bullies. It goes on to say, President of the school's Parent Teachers Association, Anand Narayan, told the Express yesterday that the Form 4 student was followed by 2 teachers in their vehicles as he walked to his house at Bromwich Village, Princestown, following an escalated confrontation between Jaden and his alleged bullies that had turned violent. It says they stayed in their vehicles while he walked and made sure he got home. If, as an educator, you had to take such drastic measures, did not lights go off in your head to tell you something is wrong? In the days following the attack, Jaden would receive a barrage of threats to his life, the lives of his family via social media. His family said. Their threats add layers to years of alleged bullying at the hands of some of his classmates and peers, his parents said. He was teased for his speech impediment, bullied relentlessly for over 4 years, according to his mother. And last Wednesday, the years of alleged abuse led Jason to reach to his breaking point. Later down into the same article, this is Jaden Lalchan speaking. Jaden Lalchan said, and Jaden Lalchan is the Parent Teachers Association president. He said, on a daily basis, schools were likely receiving reports of bullying, but sometimes some issues may go unnoticed. However, he said, in Jaden's case, the child and his parents had made several attempts to have the issue rectified. He said then reports are made, staffs at schools ought to take them more seriously. Educators had a duty not just to enforce the curriculum, but also to look after the physical and psychological well-being of the children in their care, he added. Having said that, I don't want to belabor you in terms of the carrying on about Jaden Lalchan. I think we've made the point. We've we've read what is written in the editorial clearly, and we're putting this to rest now. This situation was not sudden. This situation was something that the teachers had to accompany the young man to ensure that he got home safely days before he took his life. So it's unfortunate that if this editorial is correct, and I've heard the PTA president, he never came out and nobody came out and said, or nor did he come out and deny this. We haven't had any contrary information. So apparently there is truth in this, that the problem pre-existed, they were aware of it days before. And it's unfortunate that if they took the time to escort him home, they could have simply take the time to inform the principal that we had to escort him home to ensure he reaches home safely, and then escalate that into dealing with the bullies and letting them know, listen, you need to stop doing what you're doing. Let us get to the other point. If a child is experiencing not just being bullied and coerced and browbeaten and so on, what sort of mental health care is available to our students in the secondary schools and primary schools? If it is they're experiencing trauma, and trauma doesn't have, in this case it's bullying, right? Trauma comes from when you're in a home with an alcoholic father, when you're in a community with gang leaders, gang members, intimidating you that you can't go to school in peace. Trauma comes from different directions. It comes from within and from without. It comes from the parties or the people around you in the community. What sort of mental health care is available to our students? Because remember, children bottle things. They don't want to come home and say, well, my father beat my mother last night, he was drunk again. They may not express what they're experiencing in a classroom because you may be able to correct the problem in that moment, but they have to live with the other 34 students in the classroom after that. If a child is experiencing pain and trauma, what measures are in place to deal with that?
Okay, so before I proceed on that question, Fareed, the statements you would have read from the article, and I would want to say up front, and you and the listening public could very well bear me out on this. You don't always believe everything you get in the press. And so the statement made by the president of the PTA, I cannot sit here and substantiate the veracity of the statement. We are getting some conflicting reports as well too. And that's the reason I would say let the Ministry of Education's investigation come to a conclusion and let all the facts be revealed. I know person may want to say there's going to be a cover-up and so on, but we have to give the Ministry of Education the opportunity to complete its investigation and to issue, if they believe it's necessary, publicly issue the report of what took place. But as I said, I'm not going to substantiate any of the statements made by the president of the PTA at this time. In terms of the support that is there for the students, within the school, students can approach their, at least in the secondary school, in the first instance, they have their form teacher as well as the deans. In the primary school, it will be their class teacher. And teachers would normally pick up changes in behaviors of their students. Once, they're with them long enough, they know their particular students. And as such, investigation or referrals are done. Within the schools, there are referrals that can be done internally. And as such, the committee which deals with internal referrals can look at it. If it is something dire, then the referral is made to the Student Support Services Division. And as stated previously, there are counselors as well as there are social workers. Generally, in most districts, there are psychosocial workers attached to the district as well. Not in all cases, and we believe that there isn't sufficient of those personnel and support personnel in the nation's schools. And as you spoke about mental health, that is an issue that needs to be addressed. In Trinidad and Tobago, mental health is a taboo issue, and is something that is frowned upon. But we are seeing by and large that a number of persons are affected by mental health, some in extreme cases and some in minor cases. And we have to appreciate that mental health affects each and every one of us, and some of us have coping skills, some of us not, and need the relevant assistance. And we saw it more and more coming out of COVID, the lockdown, that mental health would have reared itself in the students, and I would say the educators as well. But within the school system, there's the Student Support Services Division, which is again understaffed and under resource. If it is resourced properly, then it can be a positive impact on the nation's children. If you permit me to say, in terms of the educators, the Ministry of Education has an employee assistance program, which our educators can access once they are challenged with any issue within delivering of their curriculum, on other aspects that will impact on it. But what we find is that a number of us, including our men, we have this macho, and I'm saying it, we have this macho attitude that things of emotions don't affect me, and I can deal with it. But we don't realize how it will eat away within ourselves, and that if we don't get the necessary intervention, it can affect our duty, a performance of our duty, etc., etc., and it could even impact on our relationship as a educator student. That relationship can also be affected in the classrooms as well too. So there are systems in place. They're not probably of the best at this time, but there are systems in place.
I was a teacher for 6 years in my early life. My personality may not be a personality that the children may have embraced. It may have been a personality that some children would have embraced. In other words, a teacher, like everybody else, has a personality. Some personalities are warm and outgoing. It's like everything else. And teachers are impacted in terms of we have personal lives. We come from homes that there are problems, and then you come and you put your best face and you go into a classroom and you deliver. So not every day is happiness is happening in a teacher's life. You have to be professional about it every day, regardless of what. And your responsibility is a lot more than delivering a syllabus. Your responsibility is a social one too. You have to be looking at your students, trying to assess who's having a bad day, who has problems, who obviously not themselves today, and to determine within your mind's eye whether this is something I need to intervene in or to make some input, find out. After you spend 40 minutes delivering a syllabus, you're happy to leave, go and drink water, go and use the washroom, decompress, because you may be walking into another classroom. If the first point of call to determine whether a child is having a problem is the teacher in the classroom, that's the essential point of call. That's the point of contact. If that the depending on a teacher to pick up on the problems and then to act on it by 35 students, human error, there's a human element where it's a child could be, I'm not in the mood. And it's not that you're not doing your job, but they're feeling that lift, that you're not in the state of mind to get involved with no child and their problems today. So I hear you in terms of, the teacher would trigger the process. But are there hotlines where, or some sort of private line where a parent could make a call, or a child could make a call and talk to somebody? Are we so advanced here in this country?
We do have a hotline for, I think it's up to 18 years of age. There's a hotline that children can access. I can't remember if it's the 555 at this time. but there are trained persons at the other end of that line to counsel students who require. To me, it's not as um, widely publicized as it should be. Sorry, and it should be common knowledge to the majority of the citizens. Um, and the other thing is that um, would the children be able to access mobile devices or even telephone to call? And then the other aspect is if the parents would encourage it. Sometimes these children, if they are accessing it, it's in the privacy, it's without parents knowing. They have to hide and do it. But there is a hotline that Childline, I think, is the entity that deals with counseling and reaching out to children who require such services.
Having experienced what we just did in terms of Mr. Lalchan, the young man, do you think it necessary now as TUTTA president to suggest or to in some way encourage the ministry to make those numbers or those access to the numbers in terms of if it has to be on a flyer on the school wall, make it available now so a child would at least have that, because we're saying that they may not have access to a phone. You might be surprised to know how many children have access to phones and how available it could be. It could be a toll-free number.
It is, I believe, a toll-free. I believe it's toll-free.
So perhaps what TUTTA can do, I mean, it's just my suggestion. If that service is available, then it should be mandatory in a school that some sort of permanent sign should be up on some part, some post in the corridors that you can call this number, or maybe principals can put something in place in terms of you can speak to this teacher or that particular teacher who's assigned. I don't know. I mean, something has to be done. We can't leave it to happen chance.
Yes.
We can't leave it to happen chance. Having said that,
we will advocate in the level of the Ministry of Education, and our members, we would advise them as well to have the information presented to the students, so that because sometimes they don't want to reach out to someone who is known to them, like a teacher, or sometimes they do, they trust a teacher, but then there are times that they may not want to reach out to someone that is known to them, and so the Childline hotline will be one that will keep that confidentiality in the back of the mind of the student. So it is something we can advocate as well too.
And children have a way they confide in teachers that they feel close to. It could be the football coach, the cricket coach, the PE teacher. It's a personality thing. People identify with similar spirits, kindred spirits.
Yeah.
Let's move into another area.
Very quickly. Quite interestingly, we met with the Ministry of Education today, the Deputy Permanent Secretary, and he revealed to us that they are looking at a series of training and information sharing amongst our educators in Trinidad and Tobago. He said that UNESCO has some training programs that they can access for our teachers as the primary contact for the students. But the emphasis must not be that they are the sole interaction. They will be the initiator of the intervention, because those programs would not train our educators to actually intervene and have meaningful interaction, but it is a way to identify and also educate our teachers as to what they can do and the points of reference that they can utilize as well too.
In an instance like this particular mother, Lalchan's mother, would she have access to mental health care in terms of being able to talk to someone, or that's an issue for the state? Meaning, does the Ministry of Education provide that sort of assistance to parents who are victims? In this instance, we have an obvious victim, or does the ministry's connection with this parent, did that die with her son?
In this particular instance, I know if the parent reaches out to the to the principal can refer the parent to Ministry of Education, their social their guidance, personal or even within the realm of assistance that they have. I know that the TTPS also has a victims unit, support unit that she can reach out, and they are usually willing to assist. And the Ministry of, I think it's Social Development, has counselors and so on available to members of the communities and the public that she can reach out to as well.
I hope the mother gets that sort of assistance, because it would be dreadful to hear that, given the level of grief she's been suffering, that, she causes any harm to herself. Let's talk about St. Francis Girls College. I know that you had a different kind of situation dealing with there. The level of crime that is manifesting itself throughout the society in the past few months, and let me say this, under your tenure as president of TUTTA, you could be a victim of circumstance. You got into TUTTA just when things get hot.
Yes. I hope people don't want to form a correlation between the two, right? I think you establish is just a how things unfolded when we come in. So it's just a laughing point there.
Yeah. Naturally, St. Francois Girls College is situated in that Belmont area. Belmont, in the 1950s and the 60s and before that, was considered a middle class community. Now it's deemed one of those hotspots in Trinidad and Tobago, and a school is located, naturally a natural feeder to the community there. Unfortunately, those persons that are involved in criminality have no regard, or there are no rules anymore, if there were rules before. And your teachers, because as they would have had to deal with having to work in an environment like that. What has been your interaction in terms of your interaction with the teachers that have been working in that particular school? How have they been coping since the incident? I think it's fairly open now that within the public space that there was 2 men arrested, 2 men shot in that particular area, and the exchange of gunfire took place while the syllabus was being delivered in a classroom. So naturally, the students would have had to take evasive action, and your teachers would have had to do similar. What has been the feedback you've gotten in your interaction there from your teachers?
So, by and large, we have staff representatives there as well, 2 of our staff representatives, and they would usually report to the district, and the district reports to National Tutor. After the incident on the Friday, can't remember the exact date, the National Treasurer and myself visited the school to get a sense of what had taken place and whatever support Tutor can lend itself to, whatever reasonable support, because some things are out of our jurisdiction and out of our control. What we do have to say, firstly, we congratulate and thank the TTPS for the manner in which they would have handled the situation by and large. They would have initially informed the school and requested a lockdown. And we have to also congratulate the staff, because they would have done drills before to have the school lockdown to ensure the safety of all in its on the compound at the time. So their policy and procedure would have kicked in and worked very well. In terms of what took place after, we were told that once they were given the clearance by the TTPS, and parents would have gotten word, because it would have spread throughout the community, were there to pick up their children. After the dismissal of school, and it was quite a bit of time after the dismissal, there are approximately 7 or 8 students who were waiting on their parents to pick them up. And it is at that point in time the TTPS would have apprehended the two alleged assailants, and they would have witnessed that. And now the staff itself, they were, for some of them, they were affected by the incident. Now, you know the location of that school, and you would in your opening statements concerning this issue would have spoken about the change in the community and what takes place. So in the back of their mind, um, they are of the realization of the community. However, these things still affect them psychologically. And so the day we were there, um, members of the police victims support unit, can't remember the exact name, were there to counsel. Members of the student support services division were there to counsel as well too. And our staff were encouraged to access the EAP should they feel that the incident would have affected them even further. But we want to say that the staff there are very supportive of the institution, of the administration by and large, and would continue to seek the safety of not only themselves but also of the students. There are still some security issues that we are addressing with the Ministry of Education because it was brought to our attention there is a drain that runs under the car park of the school that is accessible by the public. There were attempts to block it off, but apparently it has not been as effective as can be. And we were told that the two assailants that were caught attempting to access the drain, and that drain takes you down. I can't remember exactly. I think it's East Drive River down that side. So persons have been. It's used like almost a tunnel, and there are still some breaches in that drain that needs to be addressed because there are slabs of concrete that cover part of the drain, and it is accessible because it can be removed. So persons who are in that drain can lift it and move it aside and come into the compound of the school. So, and there are other aspects of the perimeter fencing that needs to be addressed, as well as the complements of security officers that are assigned to the school as well.
This is not the first time in that Belmont area you've had to deal with something like that. I remember about a year ago, a guy ran through a school compound in Belmont. There was a compromised fence. TUTTA got involved. The fence was it was improved upon. I would imagine they did some sort of work to ensure that it's no longer a low fence that somebody could get into. But one would think that one incident would trigger amplified levels of security to ensure something doesn't happen again. In this instance, in all fairness, this happened outside of the compound, so it's just a community issue.
Societal.
My concern is if I'm a teacher in that environment and I'm sufficiently affected and impacted, and I'm asking this purely from the basis of the teacher's perspective. I don't want to work there. We all spend our time going to UE or having, getting our tertiary qualifications, you get your degree. In your mind's eye, if you get into teaching, you want to work in a school that you could actually impart what you know, and you can see the fruits of your labor. Sometimes when you're in an environment that it's a challenging environment, you don't see immediately the seedlings that you plant because things grow at different rates. Having said that, is there anything in place where a teacher, when he begins to feel like, I've paid my dues, I've spent 4 years in this institution teaching here at a particular school, or I've spent 5 years, that I should be allowed to be able to move to another school so I don't become stale? I felt that way in teaching there. For instance, if I made 5 years in this particular school, perhaps I should try something different in another school. Do you all rotate your staff? rather than somebody spend 20 years in a particular school. You know the culture. When you talk to the teacher, you say, well, I'm done here. I'm good with the principal. I'm good with the staff. The environment here. Traveling is not a problem. I'm going against the traffic and not moving with the traffic. There are all sorts of little conundrums, little nuances that impact on to keep your teachers fresh and to keep them sharp and giving up their very best. Is there anything in place in terms of when a teacher figure, well, let us, and I'm using this plug now, let us say the St. Francois College teacher say, no, I'm putting a 10 years here. You see the shooting thing? This is the final, the straw that breaks the camel. I want to perhaps try and go south where it's a different kind of environment. Is there anything in place that tutor would assist teachers in if it is, they figure they had enough?
So within the education system, there's the possibility of applying for transfer after 2 years in a particular school. And so persons would apply for transfer for various reasons, and persons would stay for various reasons, as you would have pointed out. Where there's dire need and there's like emergency situations, tutor will make the necessary representation to the Ministry of Education to assist the particular teacher in getting the transfer. Now, when it comes to teacher morale, which you're speaking about, there are many factors that affect it, and one may be in terms of being stagnant, and so as a professional, one must recognize that the level to which they are at, their limitations, and should always be reflective. So teachers should always be reflective practitioners and lifelong learners, and as such should be seeking to enhance their skills and to retool and recharge themselves as well. I know in the boards, the denominational boards, they would have sometimes on a yearly basis these one-day retreats and conferences in order to reignite that passion that teachers have. So it's not only in terms of the spiritual, but in terms of the curriculum and pedagogical areas as well too. So as a professional, tutor encourages its membership to always seek to recharge themselves, to have that time to that me time, self-care, and to encourage in if there needs to be some level of intervention professionally, to seek it as well too, because as teachers we always have to take care of ourselves, and if one reaches to a point where they're not pleased with the environment that they are in for whatever reason, then they should seek a change in environment. That shouldn't be the only reason, that, are fed up at the school and so on. I mean, it can impact on your work and your delivery. But if that is the case, the transfer of from one institution to another may not be the ideal solution to it. One may have to look internally at how they can, deal with the situation, seek external help sometimes, seek some level of professional, and it may not only be in terms of in education, but in other areas as well too, in order to revitalize and to drive their passion back into existence.
Let's face it, we have a situation in this country where we have what we call prestige schools. And we have prestige schools, and we know where the prestige schools are. And we know the sort of results that they deliver. These schools that produce the national scholarship winners, the church schools that have a track record in terms of 100% passes, five O levels by each student in a secondary school. That sort of track record, there are teachers who, when they're in a system like that and they function and they're effective, they're producing, these professionals that people look up to, these elite areas. So the people attracted to the child becoming a doctor and a lawyer and well, not a politician. And And that doesn't mean to say that the tradesman, the plumber, and the mason, and the carpenter, and the electrician isn't making money. Sometimes making more money than the other line professionals. But I'm saying that sometimes teachers find themselves, you want to be in an environment where you can get a different sort of feeling. Is the Does anything like mutual, uh oh perhaps finding a replacement, assist a teacher in a transfer? Does that exist? Because before I heard once that if it is you want to leave a particular environment, you have to find somebody willing to replace you.
Yeah.
Does that exist? Or that is fiction?
In terms of the Teaching Service Commission and the Ministry of Education will facilitate more readily mutual transfer. In terms of replacement of teachers, that is again the function of the Teaching Service Commission, with recommendations from the Ministry of Education. And in some times in denominational schools, they will also consider the recommendation of the denominational board, but it is by and large a function of the Teaching Service Commission. And these so-called prestige schools will attempt to have the best teachers, and I put that in inverted commas, best teachers within their school in order to keep their reputation. Now, Farid, if we go into this issue of prestige versus non-prestige, denominational versus government school, that's going to take an entire program to discuss. I want to counter in terms of prestige schools as only being denominational schools. There are government schools, government secondary schools that are also deemed as prestige schools. So St. George's College, San Fernando Central Secondary, Couva East Secondary. In Tobago, I believe there are Bishops, and Signal Hill Tower Point. But there are a number of government schools. St. Francois Girls is a government school. To my surprise, one day, I always thought it was under a denominational board, but the principal reminded me that the school was named after the road that is in front of the school, which is the St. Francois Valley Road, and so they are St. Francois Girls College. So there are a number of so-called prestige schools in the government system. However, it is our submission that all schools should be deemed prestige schools. And in order to do that, we need to give those schools that have challenging students the opportunity to make a difference by giving them the type of resources. So these schools require additional resources in order to assist these students. And the other aspect you just spoke about, which is the technical vocational area. In the past, persons would have had the perception that the students and the persons that go into tech voc, they are less than persons who are in the mainstream curriculum. We used to say don't see long time, so you send them to do a trade. However, if we understand the trades themselves, they themselves require a certain level of knowledge, skills, memories, higher level thinking as well too. And so we have to debunk that notion that the tech voc area is for Dancy people. And all of these areas lead to national development. So the thing is that the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and by extension the Ministry of Education, has to look at what is needed for national development, and their education should be streamlined along that line as well too. It's not only about doctors, lawyers, teachers, etc. It is about skilling, giving our nation's children the skills to enhance the development of the country. And we should be looking at what the country requires and be focusing on those areas as well too, so that these students, there are too many students who fall through the crack, and there are many cracks, and some people might say chasms. We have to ensure that these children do not fall by the wayside. Give all our students an opportunity. And that's what education is supposed to do. It is supposed to give everyone the opportunity to get ahead in life and to make their contribution to society and to, make a positive impact in society. But we only sometimes focus on those careers and professions that we see are, high standard. But sorry, we're not looking at, generally what is best for the nation.
I appreciate your comment. Let's talk about the allocation of money
Mhm.
for in education as granted by the Minister of Finance. Um, I read an article here from the Daily Express Wednesday, the 2nd of October 2024, and it reads $7.512 billion is not enough, says the TUTTA President Martin Lumpkin. Let me just quote briefly from here, from what I'm reading here. The Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association is disappointed with the allocation for education in the 2024-2025 budget presentation. It says education received the second largest piece of the pie with $7.512 billion after health, which received $7.571 billion. In presenting the 2024-2025 budget in Parliament Monday, Imbert said maintenance and repair of schools was given the highest priority. He also said there are several initiatives which will be implemented in the education system during the upcoming fiscal year, including investing more in teacher training. The Education Ministry's 2025 budget application will be supplemented with special purpose loan financing to allow urgent needed school repairs to be executed by a state enterprise in a prompt and timely manner. Having said that, what is your take in terms of, and I want to specify what I've read in the newspaper in relation to Mount Hope Secondary and St. George's College. Money has been spent, so the government or the state has been investing taxpayers' money into rebuilding, repairing, upgrading, uplifting the quality of education that our student body is exposed to. I'm inviting you to comment. We have, from what was said, it went on to say that Lumpkin added that the association remains optimistic that despite a decrease of $510 million from the 2023 allocation, which was then $8.022 billion, many of the issues that continue to plague the education system can be resolved. Right? Give us a comment on that. Are you of the view that government or the state has not been investing in the structural needs of the stakeholders in education in the manner that it should, in terms of not enough money is being pumped into those areas?
And I will answer in the affirmative, because our experience in not only the recent past, but in the years gone by, we have seen where schools have been left to deteriorate, to a point where it's almost falling down, that the OSH inspectors have to be called in. And if the amount of money budgeted to the Ministry of Education last year was not sufficient to address the aging schools in Trinidad and Tobago. The Ministry of Education at a recent press conference would have revealed that over 50, and I believe it's about 56% of the primary schools have outlived their 10-year lifespan, and over 37% of secondary schools have also outlived their 50-year lifespan, and the ECCE centers about 12%. These are shocking and revealing statistics, and there are others that are within the lifespan of 50 years that are seeing some issues in terms of infrastructure. And so if it is less budgeted this year than last year, and the attention to infrastructure was what it was, then we are saying that the lesser budget would not address what is needs to be addressed. There are schools that have been started and not completed for whatever reasons, political, etc., etc., and millions of dollars, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, would have been spent on those buildings and not completed. And now to complete them will cost more than the initial cost of the buildings. And we always speak about accountability. Ministry of Education likes to bandy to our members and administrators about accountability, accounting for education. Who accounts for those buildings that were abandoned and not completed, and having children being educated in community centers in areas that were not built for education, where our students and our members are struggling with not only poor ventilation, sometimes poor lighting, sometimes in terms of toilets, in having adequate playing area, especially in primary schools. Children naturally like to play and run. If they are restricted and they don't have play fields and so, then they are missing out and they are being inhibited in a natural feature and function that they have. And so, with the budgeted amount, we are optimistic that the Ministry of Education, but we are cautious as well too, that they will allocate properly too. We are always optimistic, and we're always advocating for proper allocations. So funding for schools, we spoke to the ministry about it today. The direct funding for primary, secondary, and districts in both Trinidad and Tobago, and other areas. We're hoping that the Ministry of Education will utilize the budget in a most effective way. One of the issues that they have indicated to us is the timely allocation of the releases from the Ministry of Finance. So the Ministry of Finance, to say that they're giving over $7 billion, that sounds nice. But when it's time for the release and the Ministry of Education is struggling to get the releases on time in order to facilitate some of their projects and implementation of some of their policies, then that is where the struggle starts, and it always affects our members and the education system.
Who makes the decisions? I follow you clearly. So the allocation of $7.512 billion doesn't mean to say that that money gets to the Ministry of Education in readily for the ministry to be able to access that level of funding in order to prioritize the different schools. That is the point you're making, that sometimes the allocation doesn't mean to say it's available money.
It's not available right away. The Ministry of Education would have to seek the funding. I don't want to say apply, but seek the funding. So every month they have to seek the monies for emoluments, for wages, and so it doesn't come, automatically. In most instances, they have to in advance send for the releases for those allocations. And let me also include that within the Ministry of Education is also tertiary education as well. So you have ECCE, primary, secondary, and tertiary, that the Ministry of Education is responsible for and manages at this time.
When the money is made available to the Ministry of Education, who makes the decision what schools gets what level of funding? Because I would imagine everybody has needs, right? You're a school, you're sitting there, you're waiting to put in your plug that I need this amount of money, I need this done. Who makes the decision? Is it the Minister of Education makes the decision that I'm going to give money to St. Francois College or give money to Presentation College? Who makes that decision?
In this point in time, I cannot say exactly who makes the decision. What I can say is that it is supposed to be the permanent secretary, along with the chief education officer and the deputy permanent secretaries. To say that the Minister of Education is intervening in those, I cannot verify that or deny it. But it is supposed to be the permanent secretary, on advice from the technocrats of the Ministry of Education.
Okay, great. So what would basically happen is, I guess is there a means assessment where they go to the school and they make a determination as to what how dire is one's need, and then they start disbursing, or you can't speak to how it's done.
It is by and large all right. So in terms of infrastructure, principals will indicate to the Ministry of Education through the school's infrastructure management system. It's a computer-based system. So they do it on their devices at school, and they would lodge a ticket in terms of their request for intervention in terms of infrastructure. That goes to the Ministry of Education. The Ministry of Education would send out persons from the EFPPD department. Before it used to be EFCL, now it's EFPPD. They will come do an assessment, and they would determine how serious, or if it needs urgent attention, how urgent is the works for, and they would sometimes analyze and evaluate that from the report that the principals would send in or request. But they would do the necessary evaluation, do the scope of works, and they would send it in to their director. The director will then liaise with the chief education officer, the CEO, and other technocrats in the Ministry of Education. And it is from there that point in time, it is determined whether the project will be attended to, or they will put it down the list and de-escalate it and escalate other issues depending on if it will shut down the school.
If it is, we have a church school. I'm making reference to a school that I attended, so I wouldn't call name. The alumni, what we did is we air conditioned the entire compound, all the classrooms. Does the ministry frown upon the alumni's involvement, and they willing to fit the bill to look after immediate needs? Or is it that there's a process, and you have to get permission from the ministry, even if it's saving the ministry money?
Yes, so the process is that the Ministry of Education has to give the approval. So they will normally do their project scope, the objectives, the reasoning behind it, and send it to the ministry through the school. And so the Ministry of Education encourages stakeholder involvement, which includes past pupils, old boys, etc., etc., and encourages them to support the school because of finances that they are facing at the Ministry of Education. And even when they would not challenge, they would still encourage these past pupils associations to get involved. We are, by and large, we don't have any disagreement or any problems with it. But we would also want to ensure that other schools are also funded. So where there are schools that do not have an active past people's associations, etc., that the Ministry of Education can support these schools as well, or identify stakeholders who are willing to assist the school. We have no difficulties with it, but it must not abdicate the responsibility of the primary responsibility of the Ministry of Education, that there are areas of funding that the Education Ministry and the division, I must add, they are responsible for. It cannot be always looking for external assistance in order to fund the schools. And let me also say the Honorable Minister of Finance spoke about external funding for infrastructure when he spoke about the budget. Um, we are we are by and large we are satisfied that it has been looked at in the budget, but there must also be caution in terms of going out for external funding, which can further deplete our resources in terms of having to repay and repay in interest as well too. is there a possibility of seeking funding locally? Someone spoke about floating bonds on the local market, and I know there are times when bonds are floated, it's oversubscribed. Would it be possible now to actually seek your funding in the local market such that the funds goes back into the local market? Is that a possibility that they can look at in terms of those floating those bonds locally, and having, because the government and the minister, the actually prime minister spoke about funds that are idle. Can you utilize it in that aspect, floating a bond and let the local market, um, you know, so it's a win-win situation. In other words, the persons who are participating in the bonds, they get back an interest, but the funds are gained locally and the funds are circulated locally.
Right. We have about 15 minutes. I have some of my friends who encourage me to ask you certain things. So I'm taking that plug now. St.
Sure.
Joseph Secondary, under the previous uh, incumbent central government, a secondary school was built in St. Joseph. And if it is, I know that we could always question what is written in the newspaper, but if what is carried in the newspaper is that the structure was somewhat 95% or 90% complete, and right now what we have is a safari of bush and homeless persons living in that compound and drug addicts living there. And in other words, the school that was built, the physical structure that was built, the students were never able to access it because with the change of government, for whatever reason, the structure was not handed over to the staff and students of St. Joseph Secondary. Now, St. Joseph Secondary was commonly referred to for many years as Curep Junior Sec.
Yes.
The school was built, and I remember, I saw it, I remember playing football on that football field to the north of the original structure. And then a building was constructed on that football field moving forward. So naturally, one would have expected that they would have broken down the decrepit building to the south and shift to the north. What is TUTTA's input in terms of its interaction with central government or the interaction with the Ministry of Education in relation to why hasn't that school become available? Now, I made some inquiries of my own, so I asked the representative for the area, and he was saying to me that there was a tendering process that would have been engaged when the structure was to be embarked upon, meaning that the previous administration didn't engage the proper tendering process. Whoever built the school, meaning the engineer, that was built, and because the process wasn't complete or wasn't engaged, the proper procurement process, the state is not going to furnish that bill, and therefore the structure was left and will not be touched. So we have an overgrown structure. Now, my thing, Mr. Lumpkin, is this, and my question is being born out of that background, right? If it is, we have a structure, 95% of it is complete. It's the same thing that happened with the early education centers in Gasperola and Ben Lomond in San Fernando. Both were structures that were completed or very near completion. The percentiles carried in the newspaper was like 80 to 100% complete. And it was abandoned, meaning that it's not used. And there are videos circulating showing how it's overridden in bush and so on. What has TUTTA said in relation to something like that? Is there a compromise that to be made where those engineers, and that compromise, that discussion may be outside of your purview, it's not to be had with TUTTA, but have you all encouraged the Ministry of Education to look into that and see what can be done to allow it to be available to the teachers, because it's money wasted?
So you spoke about St. Joseph Secondary, and you would have touched on Mount Hope. Mount Hope is the same issue, and whenever we have representation at the level of the ministry, when it relates to schools like that, so these were former junior secondary schools, and in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, they were deshifted and converted from 3-year to 5-year schools. the then Minister of Education would have determined that these schools would have outlived their lifespan, and so needed to be rebuilt. So there were a number of junior secondary schools at the time rebuilt. Arangwe's North Secondary was completed. Um, uh, um, I'm trying to remember the other one in South, and Couva West Secondary. So there were a couple, three of them really, that were completed. But St. Joseph Secondary, Mount Hope Secondary, Barataria North Secondary, Karapichaima West Secondary, Superior East Secondary were schools. So you when you hear the number of schools times the number of money spent and the level of completedness or completion of those buildings, you would realize how many tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars were spent on these structures. And when we approach the Ministry of Education at our meetings and we bring up these schools, we would sometimes get no or little response in terms of that. At the meeting with Mount Hope Secondary, we asked the direct question to the EFPPD representative, because what has been taking place is that we are spending money to hold up schools like Mount Hope Secondary, to repair and so on and so on. But you would have had a structure that would have been built and just about to completion, from our understanding. Mount Hope, they were roughly 80%, and that furniture, etc., were also bought and put in the structure, and that went. But anyhow, so if you would have spent roughly 10, 15, $20 million on Mount Hope Secondary, the question was asked, how much money would it take to bring the incompleted structure up to a position where it can be occupied? The response was that in their initial estimation, the school will not be able to be occupied because of infrastructural issues, of leaving the school incomplete and unoccupied. Now, in that school, they said it was reported that if the scrap iron persons could have dug and took up the foundation, they would have done that, or dig into the walls and take out the steel, they would have done that. If you see that school now, it is just a shell, and it's left to the elements. And so if we have to complete that school, then a proper engineering evaluation has to be done, and it is the estimation that it will not pass the test. So you're talking about tens of millions of dollars going down the drain there. In terms of St. Joseph Secondary, it will have to also be done. And so the political issues should not plague our education system. Our schools should not be kicked about and bandied about as a political football, because you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars going down the drain. No one was held accountable. We understand that even the contractors were not paid, or paid for the level of structure that they would have put up, and nothing is being done about it. And the education system, and by and large, Trinidad and Tobago is suffering from the loss of these monies that could have been utilized in other areas on other schools in order to have them at a better place infrastructurally. And so we have always made the arguments at the Ministry of Education. What about these schools? So while you're talking about you don't have the money to complete, but you're spending, we will say, wasted money, because the structure that St. Joseph Secondary is occupying, the school is occupying, it is deteriorating more and more. And how much more can you fix those structures in order to have it occupied?
If I'm correct, what you're saying is that is the current position 9 years after. The position 9 years after would be that we have to get an engineer in there to assess the damage in order to determine whether it's structurally sound or what sort of investment would be required to bring it back to life or to keep it to make it occupiable. In other words, to make it OSH friendly, right? In the year 2015, when this administration would have taken to office, was an assessment done, and did TUTTA get involved? Do you have any knowledge that did TUTTA get involved at that level when this government assumed leadership for an assessment to be done then as to the structures at St. Joseph and Mount Hope, and then say, all right, now that we've met it in this condition, it's in pristine condition, or it's next to, in other words, 9 years after, it's obvious if you abandon a place, you don't sweep your house, you don't look after the guttering around the roof, you don't change a loose sheet that galvanized, water will get in and soak the ceiling will crumble on the inside, water will gather in the house. In other words, if for 9 years you walk away from your house, obviously you'll have problems. If you don't fix the problem along the way, now, my question is, did the ministry and TUTTA engage in a dialogue in 2015 when this structure would have been 9 years younger?
Yes, we did. And even before that as well, with the previous administration and the previous Minister of Education, we kept advocating, and we kept at our monthly meetings of the permanent secretary, bringing up and keeping the issue on the agenda. And the ministry would have said, yes, they cannot do all at the same time. They will be looking at some of them. I would have seen a PSIP report either 17 or 2019, which would have included Mount Hope Secondary. And for that period, monies were allocated, yet still nothing was done for that school. And the other schools as well, too. Mount Hope in particular was named in that PSIP report. And how many millions, I think it was, if not I'm mistaken, it's tens of millions of dollars, even more $100 million allocated to that school to upgrade. And so we would have had the conversation. Now, the Ministry of Education was quite content to leave it as it is because of whatever excuses they would like to put forward. But that the school, in their estimation, was comfortable in the buildings that they were occupying at the time. There were not as much infrastructural issues then as they are now. Now that it is rearing its head more and it's showing up, then they're going to use again the issue of financial constraint and not having the money to complete it. But back then they could have done it. They would have had it would have made better sense to do it then, because the longer you leave a building unoccupied, the more money you will have to spend. I think the ministers, if I'm not mistaken, I can be corrected in quoting, when she spoke about Mount Hope Secondary, she said over $200 million to bring the rebuilt part of it up to code for reoccupation, which would have, in my estimation, been more than what was estimated to build the school at the time.
But that's 200 million now, after it was abandoned for 9 years. When after not doing anything for 9 years, it requires 200 million now, which is more than you put out to build the original
structure. Yeah.
So in other words, the Ministry of Education and TUTTA were engaging in discussions as way back as 2015, 9 years ago, and no progress was made. And one of the reasons is the principals in the existing structure, their problems weren't as dire as it is now. Their school was still not as severely compromised in the part that they occupy. So it was less of a pressing issue back then than it is now.
No, but it was still a pressing issue. They would have still made representation in terms of some of the issues. Electrical would have been a continuous issue of a number of those schools, in terms of, as you know, electrical wiring and so on, they degenerate after a certain time and needs to be reinstalled and assessed and so. But it hasn't been done over the years. and the schools are left to, you know, be in those conditions and expect, and the Ministry of Education is expecting proper learning, efficient teaching to take place under these conditions, which does not make sense at all.
We have a minute left. I'm managing my time. I want to leave you with a closing remark in terms of what can we expect from your remaining time in office? I know you have some time again, but in terms of what are some of your objectives for this current uh, academic year that you hope to zero in on?
We are looking at upgrades. We're looking at increments, teacher professionalism, in terms of courses to retool and reskill our teachers and our administrators. We have made the point that our administrators need to be trained as well too in certain areas, as well as the proper infrastructure, basic infrastructure, health and safety. We're looking at, the education system by and large, producing, the outputs that they are supposed to in terms of human resource as well. And there are some areas, for example, the SCA, those standardized tests that we really feel the ministry, there was the Honorable Prime Minister would have had uh, uh, a task force into the SCA. We have not seen any outcome of it as yet. I don't think he has presented it to cabinet. Is it that the findings are too shocking for the government? But the overall improvement in the education system, our terms and conditions of employment, and we have an outstanding period of negotiations that we hope to engage in. The honourable minister would have publicly pronounced on it, and we have talked against it. But we are looking forward to engaging with the CPO in utilizing the external labour market survey and settling that period as well too.
All right. I want to thank you for making yourself available. I know it has been some time that I've been calling you, but I'm hoping that we could have another session sometime at your convenience whenever you're free. There's much to talk about, but we covered quite a few areas today. Thank you for your time and thank you for your availability.
You're
Not
welcome.
we don't always get public figures making themselves available to answer questions like this. So we really appreciate your time and the effort and energy you've put into this time with us this afternoon. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and we are honored that you invite us to your program. We are always willing to assist wherever possible.
Blessings to you and Godspeed with the work you've been doing.
Thank you very much. Same to
You're
you.
a key stakeholder. We appreciate all that TUTTA has been doing and you have been doing for the education system. Thank you so much. Enjoy your evening.
Same to you. Thank you. Bye.
David, all over to you. To the listening public, blessings and enjoy the rest of the evening.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lalchan. Thank you, Farid Ali, host of Hard Talk on Power 102 Digital Wednesday. Before we go, I'd just like to remind people that you can tune in on Tuesday for Hard Talk with my co-host, Karen Asghar Ali, as we touch on the topic of ABCs of values and, of course, give you a prelude to the visionaries. Read her book, Cocoa on a Rainy Day. Hot Cocoa on a Rainy Day. So stay tuned for that next Tuesday right here at Power 102 Digital.